Hey everybody, this is Greg Reffner with the Abstract Podcast, and we have Kendra Vu, Head of Global Inside Sales at Adjust with us today. Kendra, please say hi.
Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. As I was kind of telling you, Kendra, in our kind of prep, we haven't really had a sales leader like you before at very large companies. And so I'm really excited to kind of gain some perspective and learn some stuff from you. But before we do, I want to start with a little bit of your backgrounds. And so looking at your LinkedIn, it's obvious you've been successful, but can you walk us through kind of your journey over the past several years and kind of how you've gotten to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to maybe just roll back to about 10 years or so. Because one thing I always look for first is, what's driving the industry, what our customers need, and things like that. So really, I started for the past 10 years really honing in on digital transformation solutions. So looking for companies that are providing either mobile, cloud, or security, or all three. And the good news is that those type of companies and SaaS companies really need inside sales teams too. So I've been, for the most part, in mobility for over 10 years now, starting back with Good Technology, moving on to Mobile Iron, and now with Adjust, right? Mobile marketing and analytics platform. When I think about these companies and the journey, right, they are looking to scale the market, to grow, expand their reach. And the nice thing is that inside sales is a key element of that strategy, right? And that's where I come into the picture, which has been great for me, right? So it's been terrific to be part of this digital transformation journey, a bigger picture in the industry, and align myself with these companies and really help scale out those teams. So the nice thing, to double click a little bit more on inside sales, joining these companies, either growing like from scratch, where maybe they really just started with field sales teams, maybe a few SDRs or something, but really broadening that reach and velocity with building out SDRs and building pipeline that way. Then as the market matures and segmentation matures, adding on closing inside sales reps in some cases, right? So being able to lower our cost of sale and handle some of the smaller deals and higher velocity deals. Mm-hmm. So building out ISR teams, in some cases we have renewals reps and even customer success reps, right? So it's pretty exciting to be part of that journey and be part of leading those inside sales strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the largest team that you've ever been responsible for?
So that probably have to go back to the Mercury Interactive days. I had 6 managers, 60 reps. If I remember, my quota is nearly 150 million in revenue. It was different teams. So certainly there was the maintenance renewal team. So small team, but huge amount of revenue they would pull in. Yeah. We had named account reps. So we had a set of reps that were just dedicated to farming our customers, working with them to add more value and upsell. And then we had hunter teams, right? Just to make sure we're staying competitive and bringing on new logos and such. So pretty exciting.
150 mil. That's quite the number. That's awesome. Very, very cool.
Yeah, back in the day, I remember the CEO meeting with our inside sales team, and to put into perspective, he said something I didn't even think about it. He's like, you guys are about 150 million. I could take you public. Obviously, we were in a much larger organization then, but it was pretty cool for him to say that, and it made us all feel really, really good about the contribution we were bringing to the company, and the size of organization, the number of customers we touched, and the amount of revenue we brought in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that, so I think there's an investor pretty well known in Silicon Valley, a guy named Jason Lemkin, and he's the founder of SaaStr, which puts out a lot of content around software sales. And one of his more prevalent articles that he wrote is he talks about the 48 different types of sales leaders and how there's different sales leaders that are important based upon the stage of the company. And he talks about maybe the evangelist kind of early stage all the way up to Mrs. Dashboards, where, it's like the sales leader at like Salesforce that can kind of tweak the different levers just by looking at dashboards. And so have you found that to be the case as you've grown throughout your career, that yourself as well as maybe some of the managers that have been underneath you, that is kind of true in a lot of ways, that there's different types of leaders for different stages of companies?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's kind of it's a bit tricky to try to interview for, for the different skill sets, for the different stages. I mean, with smaller companies or early stage, we, certainly require managers and reps who can really roll up their sleeves, put in structure, put in process. They're okay with starting with, a blank sheet of paper. But I find the individuals, particularly the managers, they need to be able to handle a lot of ambiguity. They need to be okay with managing through that, right? And okay with the gray areas. And there's, some people that don't do as well, right? They want things a lot more defined, a lot more black and white, or things like that, right? So that's really important. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things that could be coming at you, and so resilience is another aspect or skill I looked at. Now, I would say through the various stages of company growth, everybody, you need different types of resilience because you're going to be facing different things.
I love that.
But yeah, as a company matures, as the market mature, now you're starting to scale then you want the, Mr. and Mrs. repeatable, putting in strategy and organization so that you can scale. Otherwise you can't, if it's not repeatable, you can't get at that, right? And you're really looking at people that know how to look at different KPIs and how to improve or increase productivity yields.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you used Mr. and Mrs. repeatable, right? I think the unicorn is how he references that person in that article, is the person who can come in and kind of make it repeatable. So when you think of your time when you had 60 reps versus where you are today at Adjust, like what skill sets, like what are different things that you kind of pull from your bag of tricks, your bag of skills that you use today versus maybe when you had $150 million number and 60 sales reps across 6 managers? What's different?
Well, I mean, the inside sales environment is much different. I mean, even just I talked about digital transformation earlier, right? I mean, today we have an incredible amount of tech stack that we have to manage. There's, before, customers would have to pick up the phone and reply to you if they wanted to find something about you. Right now, everything's online. And so we've had to become much savvier about how we learn about our customers and also how we help our customers learn about us, right? So there's, I think, a couple of things. Again, the inside sales has evolved that way, digital transformation, new technologies. The other thing too is the roles have become more specialized. And so, I always say, in terms of field sales training or sales training, one size doesn't fit all. Now it's become even more so, like training an inbound SDR is going to be different than an outbound SDR. Training a high velocity closing inside sales rep is going to be different than, say, a renewals or a customer success rep, right? So some of those things, just being aware of that, the changing environment and having to always try to stay ahead. You may not always have the answers, but just to know that we're asking the right questions, like how do we need to change? How do we need to change the roles or the strategy? And what do we need to do to enable our teams to be successful, whether it's, sales training, different tech stack, different tools, working with marketing, different outreach to customers, persona-based content, et cetera.
Yeah, I love that. So it's interesting you talk about like the tech stack, because here at Abstract, one of the things that we've realized is that there's an educational component around our product and how it's used that we have to be responsible for, and training our customers on how to use that technology, because there is so much technology being thrown at sales leaders, at sales enablement leaders, at revenue ops people, that it's almost like, you can't rely upon them to go learn how to use this technology because there's so much out there. And how do you deploy it effectively? It's definitely something that I never really thought of. That's an interesting perspective, that you have to not only know how to sell, you have to know how to specialize your reps, and also how to deploy what seems like probably never ending change of tech stacks that are coming your way. So that's That's a fair point.
Yeah.
How often do you find yourself kind of in the deals, working deals with reps, or kind of helping close deals, or is that kind of you're a little bit removed from that nowadays?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when in terms of managing closing teams, I think there's two areas, two times I really would like to try to get involved is, I mean, certainly at end of quarter, strategizing with reps on deals, figuring out how I could potentially serve as, peer-to-peer executive level bridging or something like that. But I think it's more important that upfront, though, the qualification process, like setting up that opportunity, setting up that deal, qualifying it early on so that we could develop a close plan and really, work with the customer through that buying journey.
Yeah.
Right. So, there's times where I'm sure a lot of companies have heard of, force management and medic opportunity management, right?
Yeah.
So running medic deal reviews, trying to get that earlier so we understand what we don't know about it, what holes do we have in our deal strategy, and then put together a plan around that. And then again, towards the end of quarter, really coming in to try to help close deals that way. I think for me right now, though, in terms of, being in Q4, a lot is around 2022 strategy and planning, right? And big focus on pipeline generation and investing in our SDR teams and new strategies there.
Nice. Okay. So let's kind of go back to that qualification, because obviously qualification of opportunities kind of lays the foundation, right, of any opportunity. So do you find that you're kind of driving that strategy or deciding, okay, we're going to use Medic or we're going to use Sandler? Are you typically the one kind of top down pushing that strategy? Or do you kind of typically maybe let your managers kind of drive that based upon kind of their team and their team's personalities? Or what are your thoughts on how to deploy that and ensure consistency across a large sales team?
Yeah, well, I mean, typically that's a lot of partnership with the field sales teams and the field sales leadership. So what methodology is chosen there is really, having influencing that decision a bit. But then I think too is the other thing is, again, not one size fits all, right? So deploying Medic and opportunity review against deals that are 200,000, 500,000 is going to be much different than how do we think about applying it maybe more in an inside model, a higher velocity. Like, so deals can be smaller, but the whole process of going through the qualification and asking the questions, maybe you don't fill out a Medic form for every single small deal, but getting the reps to start thinking about that so that we're working on the big deals will translate that into when they're on the phone qualifying, maybe only for that 5 or 10K deal, but now they're asking those questions. They've internalized that qualification, right? And so, working with the managers and coaching them and how to run Medic deal reviews, working with the managers and then with the reps on, again, just improving the qualification, the discovery calls up front, really driving that, into that day-to-day practice. I think the second thing, I mean, it's always tough rolling out sales methodologies, right? So reps kind of push back. And if there are ways to actually, implement it into your CRM, right? Having Salesforce fields at, at a certain stage or a certain opportunity size, you have to know X, Y, Z. So that just reinforces some of that behavior and practice into, day-to-day and week-to-week opportunity management.
I love that. Well, so at this level, right? How many reps do you have at Adjust today, Kendra?
A little bit smaller team, 30 today.
Okay. So still 30, right? That's a decent sized team. 30, 60. When you think of maybe the one attribute where you're like, okay, if I could fall back on this one thing that I continue to use to find success, whether at 30 reps or 60 reps or 8 reps, whatever that might be, like what does it take to be successful when you're leading teams kind of at scale?
That's a tough question. I mean, when you put it down to one, can I have 2?
Maybe? You can have 2. I'll give you 2, but not 3. You can't have 3.
Okay. I think one thing is just particularly running inside sales orgs is balancing and working strategically and tactically, right? That you have to get into the day to day and understand that, but then you don't want to get too caught in the weeds, and you want to make sure that, are you stepping back, making sure you put time for strategy and planning and thinking in a bigger picture and context, right? So I think that's one thing, is really balancing how you're working, how you're thinking and approaching the business, making sure there's a good, healthy balance of strategic with tactical.
Okay.
I think the second thing really has to do with, EQ, emotional intelligence. I'm a huge fan of Daniel Goleman, and through the years, there's a lot that's been talked about in terms of leadership skills and EQ skills. And so that would be the second area that I continue to work on and try to be mindful of and self-aware of, so, developing that self-awareness.
Okay. I love that. So kind of point one, right? Working in the business versus on the business, right? So having the wherewithal to understand when you're in the weeds and then when to pick your head up and kind of look around. And then also the emotional intelligence component and the ability to self-reflect on how you're working within that team, because sales reps are needy and emotional and high maintenance, and they will throw sales leaders for an emotional roller coaster sometimes, I'm sure. So kind of having that in check is key, right, to being successful.
Yeah.
So
I would say the pandemic has really, emphasized that a lot, right? I mean, it's been obviously really tough to work remote and not have those micro moments and be able to just have the quick conversations or the strategy sessions or the venting sessions in the office. And so really try to, stretch your empathy skills, your listening skills, picking up on body language when it's a lot tougher over Zoom, and getting in tune with your teams and the reps. I think it's really stretched us all.
Well, it's good, right? As we stretch, we grow. And that's, so I'm sure you've progressed your ability to handle those situations as a result of the situation we found ourselves in. So I'm surprised recruiting didn't make your list in terms of kind of the most, what you need to be successful, right? Why did that not make the top two in terms of recruiting the right people and kind of having a formula for that?
It's interesting because that's certainly an aspect. And when I think about like some of the hardest parts or the toughest part of the job, I think I actually, think about hiring that right talent and recruiting so you can avoid having to fire or let someone go because of poor fit. So that's something that's, always a challenge there.
Okay. So leads me into the next thing I want to chat about, which is what's the hardest part of, managing and leading a team at scale. And sounds like recruiting might be the hardest part of that job.
Yeah, there's that. And definitely now where, in the last few roles, I've had a global position. So it's a little bit different when you're hiring for leaders or reps in Asia Pac, and the culture and certain, interviewing is a little bit different than say hiring in Europe versus Americas. Obviously language or doing things in English where it's a second language can be a little bit challenging that way, right? But hiring is well, I would say it's not the hardest thing to do. Hiring is the most important thing to do, and if we do it right, then we avoid the harder part of having to fire, right, or to let someone go.
Okay, that's slow hire, fire fast, right? So take your time, find the right person.
Back to your question around the hardest part of job, to address that a bit. When you're running, larger teams or high velocity teams, it's always, again, making sure I'm taking the step back to look at, am I pulling on the right levers that would have the biggest impact to the business, right? Okay. And so that back to that juggling of strategic perspective, bigger context with the tactical day-to-day needs, right? Making sure that I am looking, zooming out enough to make sure I'm pulling on those big levers, right? Don't go too far down a path.
Yeah, and those levers come with experience, right? If you have a team of one or two, right, like those those levers are a lot easier to identify, but maybe at 30 reps, 60 reps, you're kind of looking at a dashboard and you're maybe looking at trend lines and activity metrics over a period of time and as it relates to pipeline generation. And so that definitely is something I'm sure you've learned over time. It's not something that you just intrinsically know day one as a sales leader. So what's your favorite part of leading kind of larger scale sales teams?
The typical sales answer is, making your number or hitting the goals and objectives. But for me, and particularly with running inside sales, and one reason why I've stuck with inside sales teams for the most part is seeing reps grow, right? Seeing them go through career paths or SDRs to inside sales to field sales, even management. I have reps that worked with me years ago that are now in director and VP level roles. So it's really satisfying, fulfilling, and seeing that. I think the other favorite part, I really love the cross-functional teaming and collaboration with other go-to-market functions, right? I love the journey of like, okay, what are we trying to get to, and how are we going to work together? What new tactics or strategies are we going to try? I love that type of collaboration, and yeah, just teaming that way. And then obviously seeing the end results. But sometimes, again, I actually feel the journey is actually more satisfying than that momentary, hey, we got the win or we hit that milestone. But usually, you celebrate it a little bit, and next year the goals are going to go up. So then it's going back to like, okay, let's huddle again, team. Let's figure out how we're gonna put our right people and right strategies in place to go to achieve the next levels.
It's you got to fall in love with the process, because whether you're on quarterly or monthly or annually, like you're going to start back at zero sometime, and it's only going to get bigger. So you have to fall in love with the actual process of getting there to find a career in sales. So leads me to my final question. What advice would you have for maybe our listeners who want to lead that team of 60 reps one day? Like how do they get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think early in the career is, don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to throw your hat in the ring or find out what career path or what possibilities there could be. Because if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And at any point, people might just say, no, not now or whatever, right? I think the bigger thing is don't be afraid to fail or make mistakes, right? So you got to try new things. You got to take risk whether at an individual level or when you start managing smaller teams to bigger teams, you've got to try that, right? So there's calculated risk around that, but from failures, from mistakes, you learn from it, right? I mean, success really comes from that. Yeah. And then I would say something that certainly helped me through multiple companies is finding a mentor, finding that exec sponsor. May not necessarily be, another sales leader or VP of sales or something. It could be a VP of marketing. It could be, head of product marketing or somebody in the organization that understands your value, that can help just provide different perspective and be that mentor and executive sponsor.
I love that. I don't think that's advice I've gotten before. So I like that kind of executive sponsor, and maybe it's somebody in, a product role or something like that, right? That, can help shape your perspective on how to work cross-functionally with the product marketing team, right? Like I love that. That's great advice. Well, I picked up on a couple key things here that I've kind of reinforced as we've gone through our time together. First off, really focusing on like EQ, right? And understanding that the ability to connect with reps has drastically changed. And so kind of having this like intrinsic monitoring, if you will, around kind of how well are you doing managing your emotions and your connection with your reps. I think that is super important, especially as you grow and scale a team. So I loved that. I really liked the kind of your perspective on I don't want to say recruiting, but it's obviously the most important part, but kind of hire slow, right? Find the right people, and then ultimately fail, be okay with failure. And it sounds cliche, but if you never ask, the answer is always no. And so anybody in sales, we should understand that we should always be asking for that opportunity or asking for that to kind of help guide us. And if we don't ask, that's on us. So really appreciated the time today. For anybody who wants to get in touch with you, Kendra, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the easiest is probably on LinkedIn. Pretty simple. It's Kendra.Vu, the LinkedIn profile. Kendra spelled Kandra, and my last name is V as in Victor U. So Perfect. I really appreciate the time, Greg. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. And I love that you called out V for victory. That's awesome. I would have used like Victor or something like that. So I love that you called out V for victory. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. It was awesome. And I'm sure our listeners took away a lot. Thank you.